and welcome to the channel. Here, I share Scareful stories. Stories to make you scared, make you think, make you wonder, and maybe, just maybe, make you a little more careful. If you like what you see, please give the video a like, leave a comment down below, and I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm working really hard on getting to 500 subscribers. And now, the Scareful story of Judy Smith, who went on a trip with her husband, only to be found murdered 600 miles away from where she disappeared, with no one knowing how she got where she was found. I've got a long list of unsolved mysteries that I've been wondering about for a really long time, so lucky you guys get to go through them with me one by one. Before there was the internet, there was a TV show called Unsolved Mysteries, and that's where I first became fascinated with Judy Smith's disappearance and eventual murder. Judith Louise Bradford Smith worked as a home nurse and was 50 years old at the time of her disappearance and death. Judy had 2 adult children from her second marriage and had just recently married for a third time. She had been dating an attorney, Jeff Smith, for many years, and the two decided to get married in 1996. On April 9th, 1997, Jeff and Judy headed off from their home in Boston to attend the Northeast Pharmaceutical Conference in Philadelphia. For Jeff, this was a business trip, and Judy tagged along to do some sightseeing. After the convention, their plan was to visit friends in New Jersey. When they got to the airport, however, Judy had forgotten her driver's license, so she returned home while Jeff boarded the plane and headed off to Philadelphia. Judy caught a later flight that night, and she met her husband in the lobby of the DoubleTree Hotel, presenting him with flowers as a way of saying sorry for the airport mix-up. As this was a working trip for Jeff, he had a conference to attend the next day, but Judy was free to do whatever she liked. She had never been to Philadelphia, so she planned on doing what people who have never been to Philadelphia do. They go see the Liberty Bell. Judy was an experienced traveler, having gone many places solo as well as with her children. She'd traveled internationally, so a little trip around Philadelphia was no cause for concern and should have been easy peasy. Now, for the day Judy goes missing, and see if any of this sounds a bit sketchy to you. Jeff says he gets up in the morning and hits the hotel breakfast while Judy sleeps in a bit. When he gets back to the room, Judy's in the shower, but Jeff reports that they spoke to one another, said their goodbyes, and Jeff went to the conference. The plan was to meet up again in the room at 5 p.m. and then head to a cocktail party, but that never happened. Jeff says that when he returned to the room that evening, Judy wasn't there. He went to the cocktail party thinking maybe she had gotten back from sightseeing, gotten ready for the party, and had already headed there. She wasn't there though, and so Jeff spent about 45 minutes looking around for her, and when he still couldn't find her, he asked the hotel to begin calling hospitals to check for Judy. While they were doing that, he caught a cab and went to places Judy had talked about visiting. Finding nothing, he called the police. The police told him to wait 24 hours and that if Judy still wasn't back, he should report her missing, which he did the next morning. Police came to the hotel and began asking people when they last saw Judy. Hotel employees remembered seeing her. One recalled that she asked where she could catch a tourist bus that goes to all the sites in Philadelphia. The bus driver remembered Judy being on the bus and getting off near the DoubleTree in the afternoon. Someone saw Judy go into and come back out of a Greyhound bus station, which is about 10 minutes away from the hotel, and it was presumed that she went in to use the restrooms. One person said that they saw Judy close to the hotel, but that she was acting disoriented. That was around 3 p.m. Judy was last seen wearing jeans, a dark coat, white tennis shoes, and carrying a red backpack. Jeff and family members went into action, getting missing person flyers out all over the city. Quite a few sightings were called into the police. She was seen in a Macy's store in New Jersey. Those that recognized her were able to identify a red backpack that Judy always wore. They also said that Judy was trying to buy dresses for her daughter, and that when she was leaving, she tried to get a young woman to leave along with her, mistaking that woman for her daughter. A private detective later hired by Judy's family says that this was a credible sighting of Judy. Over 3 months later, someone said they spotted Judy at the Wild Wild West Casino in Atlantic City. There were multiple sightings of Judy in Philadelphia, but it turns out that Judy has a look-alike in Philly who is a homeless woman, and so it's unknown if the people were actually seeing the actual Judy or the look-alike Judy. Judy's own son saw the look-alike Judy and thought it was the real Judy. 5 months later, on September 7th, 1997, deer hunters in the Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina found a partially buried skeleton near the Stony Fork picnic area along Chestnut Creek. The skeleton was wrapped in a blue blanket and was found near a picnic area. The body was wearing insulated underwear, jeans, and hiking boots. A wedding ring was still there. there. Also found near the body was a blue vinyl backpack that had winter clothing in it and $80. And yet another spot, a shirt with $87 in the pockets was found, along with a pair of expensive sunglasses. The coroner determined the bones belonged to a female and that she was likely stabbed to death due to puncture wounds and cuts found on her bra. Her death was determined to likely be that of a homicide. The cash and the diamond wedding ring that were left behind made robbery not a likely motive for the killing, and as we know, stabbing tends to be a more personal way of killing someone. The police set about identifying the body. Jeff had sent Judy's missing person flyer to hospitals and police stations all over the country, and thinking that this could be Judy, investigators requested dental records to see if they matched. They did. But how did Judy get all the way to North Carolina, 600 miles away from Philadelphia? A store clerk in Asheville, which is close to where her body was found, remembered Judy being in her store mere days after Judy was reported missing in Philadelphia. Judy told the clerk that she was visiting Asheville while her husband was attending a conference in Philadelphia. The clerk said Judy was acting completely normally during their interaction. There were more questions than just how did Judy get so far away? Where were the clothes she was wearing the day that she disappeared? Where were her tennis shoes and her red backpack? Are the items found buried around her hers, or did they belong to her killer? And who killed her? Police immediately began focusing on Jeff as being the prime suspect. By most reports, Jeff and Judy had a good relationship. One of Judy's friends, however, said that Judy was, if not ready to leave her marriage, she at least wanted a break. Investigators thought that perhaps Judy had never even made it to Philadelphia, but let's say that's true. There's still the question of how she ended up in North Carolina all the way from Boston. Jeff would have had to have gone with Judy to Asheville with no one even knowing or recognizing them, taken her into the forest and killed her, or killed her at another location and then transported her body to the North Carolina forest. That would be a feat for a healthy individual, but Jeff was morbidly obese, and police determined that there was no way he could have made it to the spot where Judy's body was found. And if Jeff was behind Judy's murder, why would he send out thousands of flyers hoping that Judy would one day be found? But for the flyer, Judy's remains may have remained unidentified for a very long time. And also, where her body was found wasn't like right at the picnic area. It was like a quarter mile. Some reports say that it was about a quarter mile up a very steep hill and off a trail. So you had to get to the picnic area, which was about a mile trek from the parking area. So park the car, walk a mile just to get to the picnic area, and then go up a very steep incline for another quarter mile in order to get where Judy was buried. So not something that her husband probably could have done. And interestingly, Judy had a bad arthritic knee, which is one of the things that they identified in the corpse that they found. And one of the ways, including the dental identification, that they decided it was Judy was this arthritis that she had. It's interesting that she would be walking that far. The mile hike doesn't seem that big of a thing, but I'm not sure then that she actually made it up the steep incline. Maybe she was killed at the picnic area and then dragged up the incline on the blanket that she is then wrapped in and buried in. That's a possibility. But back to all the questions, did something happen in Philly to make Judy leave to seek adventure and maybe seek adventure with someone else away from Jeff? Had Judy been talking to someone or having an affair and decide to sneak away for a bit to see how things would go with this new person? Where and how her body was found make you wonder if she went hiking with someone, they laid out a blanket for a picnic, and then things went horribly wrong. But if she left willingly, why would she leave $500 behind in the Philadelphia hotel room? Her credit card has never been used to this day. Had she been stashing money away for a while so as not to leave a trace of her plan? But even if she wanted to leave, why make it look like she was missing? Judy had to know that when she didn't turn up at the cocktail party that night, that Jeff would report her missing and that her family would begin desperately searching for her. That makes you wonder if maybe she had some kind of mental break that caused her to not fully understand what she was doing. But in that scenario, it's far less likely she'd be able to get all the way to North Carolina with little to no money. Where was she staying at night? How was she traveling? Was she on a bus? Was she in a car? Certainly if there was a car rental, that car would have been left somewhere after she she was killed, and that would have been a trigger of, well, who left the car here, aside from the fact that you need a driver's license to rent a car. Did she suffer from an episode of transient global amnesia, which is more likely to occur in people over the age of 50? With transient global amnesia, the person suffers loss of the ability to recall recent events for a few hours up until about 24 hours. They do know who they are, but they can't quite recall how they got where they are, and they may be unable to remember very recent to some more distant events that happened within the past year or so. Triggers for transient global amnesia include mild head trauma, strenuous physical activity, acute emotional distress, perhaps caused by bad news, an argument, or being overworked. So, is it possible that Jeff and Judy had an argument in Philadelphia and that triggered something in her where she suffered an attack of this transient global amnesia and she had no memory of why she was in Philadelphia? It would be interesting, though, that then her choice wasn't to go home to Boston, but somehow she ends up in Asheville, North Carolina, a place that she had apparently never been before. Police say that the items found near her body they believe belonged to her killer. Why would he leave behind those things? It seems pretty dumb, as that would be a way of eventually identifying the killer, but although I guess maybe it's not so dumb, since 25 years later I'm sitting here talking about the case and how her murderer has never been found. None of it makes any sense to me. None of the way this turns out makes any sense. Some think that Judy was an early victim of serial killer Gary Michael Hilton, who is known to be in the Asheville area at the time of her murder, but that still doesn't explain why Judy went to Asheville without telling anyone. Some think that the body found in the woods isn't Judy at all and has been misidentified. The body was identified using dental records, which tend to be fairly precise, especially when you have someone like Judy, who is said to have extensive dental work done. That's more things that are unique to just that one person. But let's say the body isn't Judy's. Then where is Judy, and who is the woman who they found in the woods? It's all such a mystery. Jeff passed away in 2005, never knowing how Judy got to North Carolina or getting justice for his murdered wife. What do you think happened to Judy? Did she leave Philadelphia on purpose and head down to Asheville for some unknown reason? Did she suffer from a medical condition that caused her to not be thinking clearly, and then she ran into an evil person? I can't seem to figure this one out, except to think she did go there to meet someone, but even that makes no sense, because why go to Philadelphia at all then? Why not skip the trip with your husband and head off on your own? It's so bizarre, and there's so many unanswerable questions that I'll wrap it up here. Let me know what you think happened down below. I'd love to hear your theories. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and stay careful.